We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H.
Infinite Gary. So Infinite Gary's got a picture here. You guys have probably seen this as the one-seat solution in this little bedroom here. He's experimenting with a 7.1.4 speaker setup when he's playing movies that have a 5.1 soundtrack. Should the surround back speakers be silent? If you don't have any sort of matrix scene going on, then yes, they should be silent.
Yeah, if you're playing them, if you take a 5.1 soundtrack and play it straight through, it just says the decoder, whether that's Dolby Digital or Dolby True HD. If it is a 5.1 soundtrack, then it will only play out of 5.1 speakers. To get it to make use of your other speakers, your surround backs, and your overhead speakers, in Gary's case, they are the upward-firing Dolby-enabled modules, then you would use something like the Dolby Surround Up Mixer or the DTS Neural X Up Mixer, and then sound will come out of all 11 of your speakers in this setup.
Right. So he asks if there's a listening mode on his Marantz SR6011 that will make sounds come out of the surround back speakers when playing 5.1 contact with bucketing sound from the 7.1 speakers, but not the Atmos speakers when playing 5.1. Oh, that's a good question.
It is.
Basically, the Atmos or the whatever the DTS.
Yeah, so Dolby Surround
Neo
Up Mixer
X,
and DTS Neural X Up Mixers.
Those will take whatever you get and turn it into out of all the speakers.
Correct.
But that includes the Atmos speakers.
That it does.
So, is there a way to turn off the Atmos part of that decoding and just use the 7. I mean, you could do it by just
go into the speaker
receiver
setup menu and say,
and tell it I don't have them, and then it won't play anything through them.
That's correct.
But I think that's probably not a solution that he's really super interested in. But why on God's green earth would you install all these speakers and then not want them to play?
Well, I can see it. I mean, there could be some instances where the upmixing doesn't do a fantastic job of utilizing the overheads, and you go, you know what, I would rather just turn those off, but I would still like to expand the 5.1 to 7.1. I can see that scenario. So, strictly speaking, the SR6011 doesn't actually have that. As far as I know, it doesn't have that. I'm trying to think if it has its own DSP of some sort. I suppose maybe one of those, like the concert hall.
Rock band or something.
Something like that might do
jazz.
It, but as far as I know, it like Dolby Surround Up Mixer and DTS Neural X, it doesn't, and they don't give you the option, like say Anthem does. Anthem gives you the option of you could use the Dolby Surround Up Mixer to do all 11, or they still give you the option to use Dolby Pro Logic 2X. Right? They gave you all the decoders. The Marantz SR6011 does not. Interestingly, if you go to one of the Denon and Marantz models that lets you pay $200 to upgrade to Oro 3D, Oro 3D does have both 3D upmixing and 2D upmixing. They give you the two separate settings. But the SR6011 can't be upgraded to decode Oro.
What's a 2D upmixing? What is that? Just
2D upmixing
overhead?
is stereo, actually anything from mono, stereo, up to 5.1, upmix to 7.1. That's the Oromatic 2D upmixing. So
yeah. So I don't know why you want this, Gary, but I don't think I don't.
No, that's a really good question, and
it's interesting. It's an interesting question, but I think the answer is nobody at Marantz or Denon never thought anybody would want to do it until
they figured you'd want to use all the speakers you have if you're going to upmix.
If you paid to install speakers, you want those speakers to be playing. That's more commonly the complaint than I've got too much sound coming out of my different. I want some of these speakers not to play anymore. So, he asks, are Atmos discs the same 7.1 sound with just with additional overhead sounds?
No.
I mean, there is the bass track, the bass layer, which is the the Dolby Atmos whatever channel mix, and then there's metadata on top of it, right? I mean, isn't that how this thing works? So, I mean, it's basically the metadata just says, okay, this is where you put, the sound, the overhead sounds. It's not channel based, it's object based. But I mean, it's very similar. I mean, there's not going to be a huge amount of difference, though.
Right. Well, there's two sides to the answer. So, for example, let's say there was a Blu-ray that was already released previously with a 7.1 DTS HD Master Audio soundtrack, and that's what was on it. And then there's a re-release with an Atmos or a DTS-X soundtrack on it. They didn't just take that original 7.1 DTS HD Master Audio track and throw in some overhead sounds and call it a day. So the question as asked, the answer to that is no. It is a completely new remix. They remixed the whole soundtrack, maybe not from scratch, but they remixed the whole soundtrack into immersive audio. So it's not like they took what was already there and then just added some overhead sounds. It is a remix of the original sound stems, the original little sound objects individually. So in that sense. Now on the other end of it, you can take an immersive audio mix, a Dolby Atmos mix, or a DTS-X mix, and play it in 7.1. And you won't lose any sounds. Those sounds will still get played out of your existing... They'll get played out of 2-channel stereo if that's all you've set up. So you don't lose any sounds by taking an immersive mix and playing it out of fewer speakers. But the question as asked, it's not like they just took what used to be there and added more to it. It is a totally new master.
Right, but I think that when I read the question, what I was saying is, like, if I play Atmos, like I take a disc that has Atmos on it and I play it, is it a completely different track if I'm using the Atmos versus if I'm using a non-Atmos receiver? And it's the same track. It's just the data,
it's the same
metadata.
Track. Yeah. But if you had the same movie with 2 different sound mixes, those aren't what. It's not just the same sound mix replicated and then some overhead sounds added to it. It's not that. They remixed. Same. Yeah, they remastered the entire track.
Right. So when you played that through your, if you bought this new disc, you are going to be playing the same track through a 7.1 receiver versus an Atmos receiver.
Right.
It's just the Atmos receiver can do more with it because of the metadata. Is this lastly? Are we on lastly yet? We are on lastly. Lastly asks, do we have any first-hand experience with the IsoAcoustics isolation stands? He tried comparing his Dynaudio monitors on a desk, going back and forth on and off the ISO stands. He thought the mid-range and bass sounded cleaner with the speakers on the isolation stands, but it was subtle. These stands are, I don't know if you're seeing this picture, but I'm sure you are. These are basically just a way of decoupling the speaker from the shelf or whatever. Basically, if you look at the website, they'll talk about the console because a lot of times when you're doing mixing in a professional setting, you've got your speaker sitting right on your console. Your console's got all the little sliders or whatever the stuff it has on it these days. Back in the day, I always thought of the sliders, and the speakers are vibrating back and forth and they're shaking your console. This is to stop that from happening. So Gary says he's experiencing a tightening of this and the blah, 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 blah of that. The reality is, this is what we talk about all the time, is just decoupling, stopping the vibrations from going through the speaker and into whatever you're listening to. So if something sounds tighter or whatever, there could have been some interference from the resonating of the table that it is sitting on. That could have been affecting what you were hearing. That could be it. But we're constantly harping on this anyways. I mean, these are very nice stands. It also raises them up a little bit. They have different sizes of these things, which is kind of nice. They're probably, a lot more expensive than the mouse pads Rob would have suggested. But they probably work about as well as the mouse pads that Rob would have suggested.
Yeah, they're springs. That's what they are. They're springs. I don't have firsthand experience with them. I personally think they're a bit overpriced because they're springs. All you need is something squishy under your speakers, but there is absolutely no reason why these couldn't work. And as Tom pointed out, it's nice that they have the different sizes. So if this is a matter of, I need this exact height, then you can order them in that height. So that's nice. If you're willing to just pay the money and that isn't the problem to you, then they're a totally nice solution for giving you something squishy underneath your speakers. And for Gary's purposes, I would say the louder you play those speakers, the more noticeable it'll probably be. Because if you play them, if you just had your speakers sitting directly on the table and you played them very loud, you might even hear an outright rattle that could happen.
Yeah.
Or you would hear the table itself resonating in sympathy with the movement of the speakers. Then you put the springs under them, and all that goes away. So the louder you play the speaker, the more noticeable it'll probably be. But yeah, I'm fine with them. I think they're a bit overpriced, but there's no reason they wouldn't work.
Yeah, I think they're fine.
Yeah,
they're fine. They look nice too. I mean, I like them. I like the way they look. But yeah,
they are more attractive than a mouse pad.
No, not the AVRant. The AVRant mouse pads are awfully pretty, sir. Let's not
in
go
our
through
minds.
In our minds. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.